great honor to be here this afternoon with all of you. I want to thank you for taking the time out from what I know is a busy schedule. I'd like to introduce myself, Michael Christian. I teach in the English department, and it is my great pleasure to have the opportunity today to present this event to you with all of the things that are going on in this country. The relevance, I think, is absolutely on point. First, there was the English prose writer Thomas de Quincey, author of Confessions of an English Opium Eater. Then there was Aldous Huxley, who experimented with mescaline, author of The Doors of Perception. And then there was Timothy Leary, who encouraged the use of LSD. Now, in the same grand tradition, but with a message that goes beyond all of them, a message that may ultimately work for a better goal for humanity, we have the man who discovered the fact that Ibogaine interrupts addiction to heroin, cocaine, alcohol, and a host of other drugs in one treatment. Please help me welcome the legendary Howard Lotsof. Thank you so much for coming in, Howard. We're going to have a discussion just like a Larry King style, so an informal discussion.
Let me just make sure that I'm okay on the mic. Are we okay here?
Maybe a little, get up a little closer to it.
Okay, hopefully this is doing it.
Yes.
Okay.
The first question I want to ask of the audience is, how many of you ever heard of Ibogaine before this conference? Virtually no one in America, very few people have heard of Ibogaine. It's quite unfortunate. Let me ask you first of all, how did you discover Ibogaine?
I discovered Ibogaine when a chemist I knew was cleaning out his freezer, and he knew I was interested in psychoactive substances, and this was 1962. And he said, well, I've got 500 milligrams of Ibogaine, which is the equivalent of a single dose. Would you like to try it? I said, well, what can you tell me about it? He says, well, it's an African hallucinogen and it lasts 36 hours. I said, okay, I'll take it. Meaning I will accept the bottle. And I got home, and the more I thought about it, the less I was desirous of taking it, because my experience at that time was with LSD and mescaline and psilocybin, and 36 hours of a drug, having that type of experience was not something I wanted to undertake. So I contacted a friend of mine who was into really exotic drugs, and I said, look, I've got a new drug, and I'd like you to check it out and let me know what you think about it. And a month later, I was 19, he was 25, and a month later he called me back. I was living with my parents, and he called at midnight, and woke the house up, and I picked up the downstairs phone, and my mother, as was her usual action, picked up the upstairs phone to see who I was talking to. And he said, that drug you gave me, it's not a drug, it's a food, we've got to tell Congress. So I got him off the phone as quickly as I could, and convinced my mother she didn't hear what she heard as quickly as I could. And we met the next day, and he said, look, this represents an entirely new class of drug. And I said, okay, let me see what I can do about getting some more. And it took us somewhere between 3 and 6 months to get additional supplies of Ibogaine. And the person who originally took the drug had an atypical reaction. And it may have been because his pharmacology was distinct. He was classified as a schizophrenic by the Menninger Clinic. And he said the drug takes 8 hours to take effect. So 5 of us who were in a group of about 20 young people who were doing somewhat formalized drug experimentation decided that we would take a dose of Ibogaine that afternoon and meet that evening and get together and see what happens. So I had an afternoon appointment with my psychologist, and the friend that I had given the first dose to, in fact, was driving me to my psychologist's office. I was living in New Jersey, and the psychologist was on 6th Avenue and 9th Street in Manhattan. And we were about a half hour onto the Jersey Turnpike, and I said, you know, this drug is coming on right now. And my friend dropped me off at 9th Street and 6th Avenue. And I'm crossing the street, and something says, look behind you. As I look behind me, with every step I take, I see an aspect, like a visual apparition of my body coming out of my body. And there's 7 of us. And with each step, a new, denser version appears, and the most distant just sort of vanishes into nowhere. And I make my way up to my psychologist's office, and I tell him, I said, turn on your tape recorder, and I'll tell you what I'm seeing. I've just taken an African hallucinogen called Ibogaine. And basically, we went through an hour session. The doctor wasn't surprised in any way, because many psychologists in the 60s were using LSD and mescaline therapy. And I had a number of sessions with him using LSD and mescaline. So he didn't anticipate anything going amiss, and I didn't anticipate anything going amiss. And my hour was up, and I got out of his office, and somehow I made my way home. And 33 hours later, I was in my parents' house, and everything was happening very quickly, and I hardly was aware of what was happening. Except 33 hours later, I was completely exhausted, and my thoughts were that I'm totally exhausted, I'm never going to take this drug again. And I took 2 sedatives and went to sleep. And 3 hours later, I woke up completely refreshed, and that's the first thing that really just grabbed my attention, because I've expected to be exhausted. Here I was, after taking a sedative, completely refreshed, completely clear-headed. And at the time, like a lot of people in the 60s, I was playing around with a lot of drugs, including heroin, fooling around with heroin for about 3 months. And all of a sudden I realized that I got out of the house and I hit the street. And I realized that not only was I completely refreshed, but any withdrawal signs that I would have been expecting from heroin were gone. And I just stopped dead in my tracks, and I looked at this large tree in front of my parents' house, and I realized that not only was I not in withdrawal, but my entire perception towards heroin had changed. Where previously I viewed heroin as a drug which produced euphoria and well-being, and now I viewed heroin as a drug that emulated death. And I followed the tree up into the sky, and I saw these clouds in the sky, and I realized that for the first time in my life, I wasn't frightened. And that brought me to the understanding that at least certain drug addiction is fear and anxiety driven, and that fear and anxiety were gone for the first time in my life. And that's how I got out.